Hi, guys. Welcome to Cuppa Joe. Today in the carpenter shop, I have a very special guest, Scott Carter. Scott, please tell us about yourself, your work with the cause of sainthood for Father Capon, and how do you like your Cuppa Joe?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, excited to be here. So I'm from Wichita, Kansas originally, and I grew up in Wichita, lived most of my life here. Learned about Father Emil Kapaun, who was a priest for the Diocese of Wichita, my senior year of high school, and our chaplain who taught us a Christian vocations class said, "Hey, there's this priest you all need to know about," and bought us a shepherd in combat boots. And so that was my first introduction to the life of this heroic priest, this heroic man. And after a few years of studying engineering, I ended up going into the seminary and really got to know him better there. Ended up discerning. I'm married and have one little girl who we named Amelia after Father Emil. But in my time in seminary, I again got to know him better, I should say. After seminary, I was working at Catholic Charities, and this position opened up to help with the cause for sainthood, to help our Episcopal delegate, Father John Hotsey, who's done so much of the research, led so much of the research, I should say, into his life, presenting his cause in Rome. And so I do a little bit of everything. I think I've been at it now for about 7 years, and just really helping share his story, promote prayer, trying to encourage people to seek him, to follow him as an example, as an inspiration. And so it's, just involves so many different things, from websites and social media to guiding tours, giving talks, mailings, all that sort of stuff. And so it's a pretty interesting job. I get to hear from people all over the world who have been inspired by Father Capon. And good to be here with you this morning. And as far as coffee, most of the time, pretty much have it black. I've got a nice little mug with Father on one
Oh,
end,
nice. That's
and
cool.
actually St. Joseph on the other.
Perfect.
My
Wow.
wife got this for me, and I love it. I do tend to like light roasts, so it's what
That's
it is.
cool. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, you said that your daughter is named after Father Amelia.
yeah,
That's
yeah, absolutely.
cool.
So something we heard some other people had done before, so it wasn't like we came up with it, but we really love the idea. My wife's actually birthday is the day of Father Capon's death, May 23rd. So kind of coincides. So she has a devotion to him, and we thought we definitely want to do this.
And I'm sorry, what was the date?
May 23rd.
May 23rd. So if he becomes a canonized saint, that'll probably be his feast day.
Yeah, I think so. There's not really a whole lot else on the calendar, so
Well, that'll be really easy for you to remember your wife's
I
birthday
know.
and like your favorite saint's,
Yeah,
saint day. That would
for
be
sure.
cool. Wow. And what type of engineering did you study?
Aerospace, actually.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's cool. That's
It was
right up
pretty
my
fun.
alley.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Don't ask me too many specifics because it's been a few too many years, but
So
yeah, I enjoyed
aerospace
it.
and theology. So you're kind of like going here on a wing and a prayer.
Yeah, 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 that's right.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And I like my coffee like you like your coffee. But I don't know if you know this little trivia. I thought it'd be kind of cool today that
Hmm,
coffee was
interesting.
consumed so frequently by American GI Joes that the term Cuppa Joe became synonymous with a drink. So had you heard that trivia before?
I know, actually, I hadn't. I mean, it makes total sense. And yeah, there's a good story, a good connection later on, I think, too, that emphasizes that.
That's awesome. Very good. Well, cool. Well, Scott, my second question is this. In seminary, you developed a great love for the servant of God, Father Emil Joseph Kapaun, or
That's
Kapaun,
right.
tomato. And Father Kapaun, he once said, God is as real as the air you breathe but cannot see. Tell us more about this St. Joseph-like shepherd in combat boots, as you said earlier. I love that description, a shepherd
Oh
in
yeah.
combat boots, uh, who he himself wanted to spend himself for God as a military missionary chaplain. And he said, my place is with the wounded.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that picture is so descriptive because it shows both sides of things. It shows his priestly identity, which was, you know, above and all be all. It was the first thing that he did, but also, you know, you look down and you see the combat boots that he's wearing. Obviously, celebrating mass on the hood of a Jeep, and so I think it shows both sides, and it's a wonderful depiction of him. But yeah, this was a man, I think, where there's a lot of ordinary in his early life, a lot of ordinary really leading up to the last year of his life. And then just the adventure comes out, the amazing stuff. The men talk about him dodging bullets or going foxhole to foxhole between explosions to visit men, really being sort of like a Mother Teresa figure in the prison camp that he served in, and eventually dying there. But by far, all of the men who were with him in the prison camp said he is the greatest man that we have ever known. People will say, I can't, yeah, no one ever lived up to his example after that, but we always looked up to him. And I think, you know, it's just such remarkable testimony from the men who knew him. But again, I mean, his early life was pretty simple and ordinary. He grew up on a farm in the Pilsen area, Kansas, which is kind of in this little center of the state, a little east, but it's a very poor community. His family was pretty poor. They even leased the land that they farmed. They didn't even own it, and but grew up really centered on the faith. I think they were 3 miles from the church, and they could see the steeple from their house. And he would either walk or ride his bike to serve at mass before school started. A lot of times people would see him with flowers on his handlebars that he would place at the statue of the Blessed Mother. And he had a very, very tender heart, but he was also very much a boy. He was probably one of the hardest working people in the community, full of hard workers. And I love doing all the ordinary stuff like fishing, hunting, exploring outside, all that sort of stuff. So, but maybe one of the first inklings, something remarkable about him is his mom said that he hardly ever complained about doing chores. So he was very willing to, I think, you know, play his part, knowing that on the farm everybody needed to chip in to survive. And as he got older, he really felt a calling to the priesthood. He initially actually felt like he wanted to be a missionary, go overseas to spread the gospel. But his path into the priesthood ended up being as a diocesan priest, particularly because he knew some Bohemian and they needed some of that for the Czech speaking immigrants that he grew up with, as well as a few other places in the diocese. And so he became a priest in 1940. He kind of marveled that God was calling him, that he could here, you know, the Blessed Mother wasn't called, but here he was called to be a priest and to absolve sins and celebrate the Mass, and was really just very excited, thrilled to be serving as a priest. But obviously, with the war going on, he was very aware of what was going on in the Czech Republic and Eastern Europe. Really felt the patriotic spirit to help out both, again, America and just worldwide. In 1943, was finally given permission to enter the armed forces and went through training, and towards the tail end of the war in 1944 and 45 was actually sent over to Burma and India, kind of lesser known theater of the war, but definitely served the men over there. After the war ended, he came back, studied at Catholic University and everything, but really just felt that tug again, and so entered again in 1949. And after a year in Texas, was sent over to Japan as part of the 1st Cavalry Division. And they were kind of there as a peacekeeping force, but also training just in case war broke out. And sure enough, that summer of 1950, the Korean War started. And since they were so close, he and his men were there about 3 weeks after the war started to try and kind of stem the tide and turn the tide of the war. And it was really then, like I said, that the extraordinary kind of starts to come out. And the men said he'd be walking down the battlefield just kind of like he was walking in a big city and oblivious to everything going around him, but every now and then he'd have to run for cover. And it's pretty remarkable. I think right away he earned their respect by being right up on the front lines with them. He actually was awarded the Bronze Star for rescuing a squad leader who was wounded, pulling him back to safety under machine gun fire, and that got his name out there. I think that, hey, there's this chaplain with our unit that's going to make sure that everybody makes it out okay. He's going to be there to pray with us. He's going to be there to cheer us up, and yeah, it was really, I don't
Wow.
know, yeah.
Yeah, was if I can jump in real quick, the I know you got the Bronze Star and also the Medal of Honor. And when you saved that man's life, is that the one that I put on our Josephology Facebook group where the gentleman was explaining how he was just laying in a ditch? They thought he was dead, and then they saw that he was moving and
Yeah.
they were about to shoot him. Is that the one? And then Father Emil walked over and pushed the guy's gun away?
Yeah, so that's Herb Miller, and at
Yeah,
the
that's
Battle
it.
of Unsan, which was All Saints, All Souls Day,
Oh wow.
1950. Yeah, his last masses celebrated were on All Saints Day, and the attack came at night, and it was a really rough battle, and the men were outnumbered, and Father just went around. Actually, at one point he was captured, and the men were able to break him loose, but he kept going about what he was doing, and everyone said, hey, Father, you got to try and get out of here. This is no place for you. We're probably not going to make it out. And that's where that line comes, no, my place is here with the wounded. And so he actually chose to stay with about 35, 40 guys that he and another doctor had rescued to safety, pulled them off the battlefield. But they realized they couldn't get out of there. And so um, when Herb's story comes into it is actually a couple days after the battle. He was laying there wounded in a ditch. Grenade had gone off and wounded his leg. And sure enough, one of the enemy soldiers came over and had a gun to his head. And Father notices this and just says, hey, I'm going to go over there, shove the gun out of the way, picks Herb up and takes him back to the rest of the men. And then on the way to the prison camp, if you couldn't walk or people weren't carrying you, there's a good chance that you would either be left behind to freeze or they'd hear a gunshot at the back of the pack. And so Father said, hey, I'm going to carry you. And Herb says, I probably weighed 20, 30 pounds more than him. He was kind of tall and lanky, but somehow he was strong enough and just carried me. And if he wasn't me, like he'd be helping somebody else. So it's quite remarkable, quite heroic, and saved his life there. And then, yeah, in the prison camp, did so much to save the lives of so many of the other men there too.
Yeah, that's just amazing. And Scott, you know everything about Father Emil, but in my short time of researching him, the my favorite video was that testimony of Herb Miller, Sergeant Herb Miller, which
Yes.
I find kind of interesting because he's a big, strong sergeant guy, but he told that
Yeah.
story so dramatic with tears in his eyes about how the
Yeah.
guy had the gun to his head, and
Yeah.
he thought, well, game over, that I'm dying right now. And he said he doesn't know how, like Father Emil just walked over. He should have been shot right away when he was walked over, like
Yeah.
out of rank or whatever. And then he he knocks the enemy soldier's gun out of the way. It's like, what? Like, two
I
strikes, you're
know.
out. You should have been shot. I don't know about you, but have you heard the story about Saint Maximilian Kolbe? And if so, does this not remind you of how Saint Maximilian saved the life of one of the POWs? It sounds so reminiscent of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the most common connections that people make, and that willingness to offer one's life for the sake of another. And actually, um, the a lot of the people that know Father, a lot of the people that historians and have talked to a lot of the both the soldiers on the battlefield and the prisoners of war say, like, yeah, we think that he probably knew that he wasn't coming home, and that he just decided, hey, I'm going to do the best that I can and serve these people, and I'm happy to give my life for them. And you can see that several different times, both on the battlefields and in the prison camps, and most especially when his captors came to take him away. And he had been serving in the prison camp for about 7 months. Uh, Conditions were just rough. I mean, it's hard to even comprehend, but temperatures were -20, -30 degrees below zero Fahrenheit. The Um, not a lot of food for the men. They mostly had their summer uniforms on, and so a lot of men would just simply freeze to death. They would be sick with dysentery. Lice were a real problem, and he would pick lice. I mean, just do everything to serve the men. Uh, Even give his own food away. He'd steal food at times to give to the men. Probably wasn't sleeping a lot because he was going around and serving the men. And he just saw this again, like Maximilian Kolbe, as his priestly duty. Like that's who the priest was.
And the men just
Of
really
Christ offering his life for others. And yeah, the men tried to, put up a fight to stop him when the captors came to take him away. And Father says, no, don't worry about me. He says, I'm going where I always wanted to go. When I get there, I'll say a prayer for all of you. And I'm sure that those prayers, helped the men make it the rest of the time in the camp too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, he's, as you can see in this picture, I mean, he's probably the one thing that was keeping the guys going from, just dropping into utter despair. I can't imagine. I mean, thank God I've never been in a war. I can't imagine what it's like. It's just really got to be like hell on earth. Um, and this picture kind of, I think, touches nicely, kind of dovetails into the last one where he said, my place is with the wounded. And I think there's really a time such as this where we need good fatherly men like Father Emil Kapaun, because I think so many men are wounded, even today, even though we're not, on the battlefield, so to speak. Really, we are, because I think men are wounded, and I think there's a big hole there for a good father figure. And we'll come later and talk about your Kapaun's men group.
Yeah.
But before we get there, let me ask you the third question, which is this. Father Kapaun picked St. Joseph as his confirmation patron saint. And I think that, of course, is so cool. And I don't know if you
Yeah.
can see this ring here. I just got this, a friend gave it to me. My friend Andrew Kong in Singapore. It's actually got St. Joseph on there and the Christ child. Um,
Nice.
yeah, it's so cool. But with that in mind, what connections do you see between his handyman farm life in Kansas and his work in the prison camp in Korea, where he rose every day at 5:30 a.m. to care for his boys, as he liked to call them? And how does this heroic example remind you of the very ordinary yet extraordinary fatherhood of St. Joseph?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, Father Emil's middle name was Joseph, and probably led a lot to his desire to choose him as a confirmation patron. It's kind of funny. I people would ask me this, and for a long time, I didn't know the answer, and then I stumbled across this journal entry, actually from March 19th, the Solemnity of Saint Joseph, 1932, when he was his senior year of high school at Conception Abbey's boarding school. I mean, he would keep a journal for a couple years, and it was very simple. He always talked about the weather and everything, but just short little line when he says, "Today is a fair day, only it's pretty cold. We went to high mass today, as it is so St. Joseph's Day, my confirmation name. I went to confession, and then in the evening to stations." And I was like, "Oh yes, finally I found it." And I think it makes total sense. I mean, I think his life on the farm really gives him a great perspective of what St. Joseph went through. And really, I mean, most of what we can surmise about what he admired about his patron comes from those two things. One, his childhood experiences, but then he does have a few words written about him in a homily that he gave actually to his seminary classmates as a deacon, which probably says a lot too, because he probably witnessed a wide range of people there. Um, and he says, so this is to quote from that homily. He says, Joseph was a carpenter by trade. His tools were few and simple. His work was hard and slow. Sharing in this humble, hard labor was Jesus, the Son of God. He says that Jesus wished to show that the simple, humble life is very pleasing to God. If Jesus had wished, he could have made Joseph the most outstanding carpenter of the whole nation. He could have amassed a great fortune of wealth. They could have lived in ease and riches. But Jesus wished to show that the simple, humble life is very pleasing to God. And he goes on and he focuses really on three different things. He says, though, it's a homily on the Holy Family. And he says, that the charity of the Holy Family is what we should imitate. He says, particularly those three things. There's obedience, self-sacrifice, and humility. And so all of those things, obviously, St. Joseph exemplifies. I mean, his quick obedience to our Lord and taking Mary as his wife, and leaving to go to Bethlehem, and then leaving Bethlehem to go to Egypt to flee for Jesus's safety. Just that obedience, that quick obedience in his life. And I think Father, at times he was serving in assignments that weren't his favorite, but he was willing to be obedient. Obedient, I think, to where God was leading him with that call to the military, and being there on the battlefield. Self-sacrifice. Gosh, I mean, you see that he was able to find, I think, the joy in that too, knowing again that like that's how we grow closer to Christ. And whether it's the simple ways of being on a farm, doing our daily chores, not complaining about them, having to chip in, longer hours when it's hard, just being there with our family. But like those little self-sacrificing things when he was younger led then when he was in the prison camp to do the amazing things. And as you said, he would rise very early in the dark at 5:30, and it's almost humorous. What he would do is he would go out and he would, with some wood or twigs that he had found, make this fire, again, sub-zero temperature, and he would melt snow in these pots that he had made by hand. So they didn't really have a whole lot to work with, but he had found some sheet metal and banged them into like these rectangular pots or pans that he would use to melt snow. And one of the other men, William Funchess, he was a farm boy too. He said, I tried to do that and just everything leaked out. And he said he actually went to Father Kapaun as Father was sick, like in the last few weeks of his life, and says, "Hey, you've got to tell me how to make them." And so Father explained to him like where to fold, how to fold it in together. And there was this diagram of how to make a pot from a flat piece of sheet metal. And but he would melt the snow, and then he would actually go, and he had roasted either like some sorghum beans or just found whatever the heck he could scavenge in the fields. I maybe put it like in a tube sock, and then put it in this snow that he was melting. And then he would knock on the doors of the huts, and he'd say, "All right, boys, it's time to get up. Here's your coffee." And he'd offer them this, this warm drink. And they all said it didn't taste like coffee. We knew it wasn't coffee, but for us, it cheered our spirit. And I think to go back to that conversation, I mean, it was something that they relied on so much. He was just a little sense of home, a little sense of dignity, that was able to help them start their day to face the difficulties of just another day that would drag on. But it was also good for them physically. I mean, they needed clean water to drink to help them get through their illnesses and everything. But again, like, Father was out there doing this. Hardly ever did he complain. There might have been a couple times which let the people know, like, okay, he's human like us. But he just, he found that joy in serving the men. And so much so that actually when he died, again, halfway around the world, terrible conditions, probably could have made it home if they had the right treatment and everything. He didn't complain. He said, "You know what? Tell my bishop that I died a happy death." When he was ordained, like you said, he wanted to spend himself for God. He wanted to do it cheerfully, no matter the circumstances. And he was able to live that out.
Well, speaking of cheerfully, they say, when he was growing up, he was kind of quiet, and he didn't mind going off by himself. But they also said that he had a really keen sense of humor. And I think that was just like St. Joseph, quiet, but also I can see St. Joseph, telling a good joke from time to time. So with that in mind, tell us what's going on here. Why is he laughing and holding a pipe?
Yeah, so he was pretty well known for his pipe, and especially on the battlefields. That the men said it was pretty much everywhere with him, and especially in some tight situations. There was actually one point his assistant said that he didn't return from whatever he was doing, and so he had to go out and search for him. And he found him in a ditch, and he was taking cover from gunfire. He said the only thing he told me was like, "Yeah, I had to dive into the ditch. I broke my pipe. And apparently a sniper bullet had come through and actually hit the stem of the pipe. And
Wow.
so all that was left was the bowl. And so here's a picture of him afterwards, just grinning ear to ear, holding up his pipe. I think he taped it up with some medical tape and just kept on going. But yeah, you're right. He definitely had a good sense of humor that I think the soldiers appreciated, and just yeah, lighten the mood and the spirit, and let them just know, yeah, everything was going to be okay. God was with him.
Well, that's great because a saint is usually filled with joy and a good sense of humor. I mean, I can't remember, some famous saint said, like, a saint should not be a sourpuss. And
Yeah,
even in battle, having a sense of humor is hugely important. I think it's a grace, that he was able to see that this is not what it's all about. There's an end game going on here, and this is just, the painful 1 second that we're enduring. Um, the fact that, if I heard you right, did you say that his mom said he never complained about doing chores?
pretty much. Yeah,
Wow.
I think there's very little
Well,
complaining.
as a as a father of five sons myself, if you had a son that never complained about doing chores, I mean, that right there could be a cause for
Yeah,
sainthood.
maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration. I don't know, but it does seem that he didn't, yeah, didn't complain too often. So they were very hardworking people. Yeah,
Well, it's I've never met someone that was raised on a farm that was not really two things, really a good person, but also quite resourceful. My dad
yeah.
was raised on a farm, and when my dad came to Hong Kong, I think it was so cool. We actually read the book of Father Emil Kapaun, which I thought
Oh
was
wow.
cool because my dad, he's a Vietnam War vet, but basically every night he'd read the book to our sons. We thought it was kind of cool because we're not that far away from Korea, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
and so Father Emil reminds me a lot of my dad in many different ways. Now I got another picture here of Father Emil holding this pipe, but this one is actually, if I can move out of the way, it was drawn by a guy named Chase. Now,
Yeah.
my research, this guy named Chase, uh, I guess he had a miracle thanks to our man, Father Emil Kapaun.
Yeah, so I mean, we think so. Nothing's been officially approved, I guess, by the Vatican yet, and they don't do that until after he's named venerable, kind of on the way to blessed, or then blessed on the way to sainthood. But yeah, we certainly think so, and I mean, he was. Pole vaulting, and his pole snapped, and when he fell, his body landed on the mat, but his head landed on the concrete, and was rushed to the hospital and had obviously severe brain swelling. Actually, I had to remove a portion of his skull to make room for the brain, but all the doctors said, oh, he's not going to survive, not going to survive. uh, they started praying to Father Capon, and sure enough, he makes it through the night. Next day, well, okay, but he's going to be in a coma the rest of his life. They keep praying and everything. They got the word out. This was kind of when Facebook was early days of Facebook, and they went all over the world and stuff. And sure enough, next day he wiggles his toe, and just little things that along the way, like he would exceed expectations almost on command. And uh, after about, I was like 33 days. It wasn't 33 days, but it was maybe around a month that he was able to get out of the hospital and go to rehab, and then he was out of rehab pretty quick and went home, and he's with us today. And actually, interestingly, I think the part of his brain that was damaged, and I think they even had to remove some of it, was the part that was supposed to allow you to draw. And
Hmm.
so he's kind of his drawing is almost proof that
Yeah,
of his recovery. But
it's
yeah,
a
he's in the Wichita area, and there's several others that we've heard of. I think one of the coolest things is being able to hear from people who have been helped by Father in so many different ways.
Yeah, there's
Um,
also I read there was a girl, I think she was like a soccer player.
yeah,
What was the story
yeah,
on?
her kidneys and lungs shut down. She had an autoimmune disease, and they put her into a coma for a couple weeks to try and get, her body kind of back in order. But when she woke up when they brought her out of the coma, her lungs and kidneys were working just fine, and there was zero evidence that they had any distress or damage or anything from this, which just amazed the doctors. And in the meantime, obviously her family, she grew up kind of hearing Father Kapaun's story too, and her family prayed, that the parish was praying for her, and yeah, just got a remarkable recovery, and I think no side effects afterwards either. So it's pretty amazing. Yeah, one of the fun stories I heard from a Iraq vet who was actually a chaplain. He was a Mormon chaplain, and he said, when I was over there in 2007, I was really struggling to feel like I could live up to my duties. And he said, obviously, I was praying to God to help me. One night in a dream, he said, like, this guy came to me dressed in all white, like head to toe, suit, tie, trousers, shoes, all of it white. And he said, hey, just trust in God, trust in your army training, and everything's going to be fine. And he said, sure enough, the next day I woke up and I just had this sense of peace about me that really stayed with me throughout the whole time I was over there. And I was fine, I was able to go about my duties just fine. And he said it wasn't until years later, I mean, like a decade later or more, that he was doing some research on the Battle of Unsan, saw Father Kapaun's picture, and realized, oh, that's who it was who came to me. But I think it's so remarkable. I think, even in the stories that I hear of people who maybe were praying for a miracle and something didn't happen, but that sense of peace that he brings to the situation, just like, with this army chaplain, I think is remarkable. And I think is a good sign, hopefully, of the Holy Spirit, and that hopefully he's in heaven interceding for us.
That's awesome. That's an awesome story. Well, thank you for sharing that. So Scott, the surviving POWs of prison camp number 5 say they admired and loved Father Kapaun for the Joseph-like witness he gave by his kindness, humility, cheerfulness, piety, and hard work. Now, tell us about Kapaun's men who strive to imitate these virtues. So tell us about this group, its vision, and also, is Kapaun's men the guys who started that annual 60-mile Father Kapaun pilgrimage?
Yeah, so actually those are two different things, although they are kind of intertwined. The pilgrimage is a really cool experience. It was started by a priest for the diocese who, prior to becoming a priest, had been in the army. And it's a 61-mile walking pilgrimage, kind of both, in the vein of pilgrimages throughout church history, and then also in kind of commemoration of the prison march that Father and his men had to go through. And so it's 4 days, 3 nights, 60 miles, and we stop and learn about Father and pray along the way, and it's a really cool experience. Kapaun's men kind of came out of that in some sense. There's a group that had been meeting and really wanted to imitate Father Kapaun. He was another potential miracle had happened in their community, and they really just were attracted to this man. And so kind of on the pilgrimage, there were some discussions with some guys in Wichita area that said, hey, yeah, this is something that we ought to pursue. And so put out several different video series kind of sharing Father's spirituality and who he was and his example as a way to build up men. And then kind of culminating in the pilgrimage series, we decided, hey, let's share the great pilgrimage where this kind of all came from and everything. But yeah, really, I mean, Kapaun's men goes back to those men who served with him in the prison camp, because they were the original Kapaun's men. When he gathered this group of guys about him, he built them up. He said, hey, you got to look after one another, keep saying the prayers. Even when he died, he commissioned them kind of to go on and carry out his duties, and they were bound and determined to live his example and not let that die. And so when you fast forward to us here in 2022, I mean, that's what our goal is too. And so Kapaun's men kind of revolves around so knowing his story, first of all, and we recommend, if nothing else, at least watching the Virtue series, because it really gives you a way into his life as well as the virtues that he lived. saying 3 Hail Marys in the morning and evening, which is a practice that he apparently recommended. It's a simple practice of prayer, but just a good reminder to tie us to, to our Lord. And then finally, really just being a kind of a commitment to going, like we like to say, foxhole to foxhole, to accompany the men and women around us. And like you said earlier, I mean, there's so many people who are wounded in different ways, and it's maybe not our natural inclination as men to stay behind with them, but like St. Joseph, like Father Emil, really that faithfulness, that loyalty to those in our care, and those that we encounter. So yeah, we've got some great resources out there for whether it's men who are interested in doing it on their own, or in a group. That if you go to capinsmen.com, there's some, you can kind of find all that information.
Okay, now I'll post that in the link below later. So it's
Right, yeah.
capeandmen.com.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. And you said a priest started the pilgrimage. What was his name?
Father Eric Weldon.
Oh, Father Eric. Okay, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, he's great. We used to be neighbors for a couple years. I mean, literally like across the street, and recently was moved. But yeah, he served in the army for about 7 years, I think, before he became a priest. And so loves history, loves all of that, and said, hey, I kind of started in some ways for me, my own priesthood, getting to know Father better, but then it just grew from there. People just kind of wanted to come, and so this past year I think was one of the bigger years, and we had it was between 300 and 400 people that participated, and not just from Kansas, but really from all over. So it's a great experience. It's always kind of the first weekend in June.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So where's Father Eric Weldon at nowadays?
He's in Hutchinson, Our Lady Guadalupe.
Okay.
So yeah.
Using his Spanish, no doubt.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And his brother, Father Jim Weldon?
Yes, he's also using his Spanish, in Wichita here at St. Patrick's.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, small world. Well, I got to fly Father Eric one time to Kansas City. We did like a Pilots for Christ flight with him and another, I think, seminary.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's cool. I didn't know, or maybe I'd forgotten that Father Eric started the pilgrimage.
Yeah.
That sounds so cool. It sounds kind of like right up his alley too.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Well, I think it's cool. You mentioned that, he read that excerpt from his diary on March 19th, the Feast of St. Joseph. And of course, March, like May is for Mary, March is for St. Joseph. So I think it's cool that if his feast day, that is Father Emil Kapaun's feast day, becomes May 23rd, it'd be cool that it's within the month of St. Joseph.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a cool connection. I always look for little connections. So, well, this brings us up to our sixth and final question. Let me bring up a picture here that kind of sets the stage. 1 second. All right, so since his homecoming funeral memorial at the cathedral in Wichita, Kansas last year, who has been the most famous visitor to his tomb so far? And tell us the story behind this beautiful hand-carved wooden crucifix.
Yeah, so last year with really unique experience. So for years, I mean 70 years, most people, most of the POWs thought that his body was buried in a mass grave in North Korea. It turns out that after the war, his remains actually were returned. There's about 4,000 remains that were returned. Thankfully, he had not been buried in the mass grave, but was buried kind of in an individual grave in the prison camp, in an area where most of the prisoners couldn't go.
Yeah, like behind someone's house or something.
Yeah, it's behind like a little hut somewhere. And the guards, for whatever reason, did not go with the American prisoners that day, and so they decided, hey, let's bury him here. And when the war ended, obviously they came across the remains and sent them back. But of the 4,000, there were about 800 that they couldn't ID, and they were buried in Hawaii at the Punch Bowl, the national cemetery there in Honolulu. And so finally, they made some great.
I think that's part of Father Emil's sense of humor too. He's like, yeah, I got to hang out in Honolulu for a while.
I know. I'm like, gosh, this is pretty nice. Sorry to bring him back here to Wichita. But yeah, the government, the DPAA lab, really has made great strides in being able to identify these guys. And so I've been on a project to try and identify all the Korean War remains that they have. And he was one of them. And so, yeah, at the beginning of March last year, it was announced that he had been identified.
DNA.
And the family, in conjunction with the diocese, decided to bring him home to the diocese and to place him in the cathedral, kind of the mother church, obviously, of the diocese. And so the picture in the upper right hand of the screen is the army came out and gave him a proper send off or a proper arrival, I guess, after the funeral, which was crazy to celebrate a funeral for someone you are pretty sure is in heaven, but really awesome. Really exciting. And yeah, they laid him to rest in the cathedral. And I think it was really cool because the men that were accompanying him, that served as the casket bearers, the honor guard, the firing party, they were from his unit, the 308 Cav Division in Texas. So they came up to honor him in that way. And it was just remarkable, the turnout of again, all sorts of people, from our Catholic students to just regular citizens who wanted to pay him honor. And it's
Yes.
really a privilege to be a part of. So now he's buried here. We've had people from probably definitely over 40 states, 5 or 6 different countries that have visited. We've actually had Chris Stefanik has come down. He was a big fan of Father. He's got a video that probably has 1.5 million views at least. I think he's done more with
Yeah.
a 5-minute video than I've done in my 7 years. But Jim Caviezel was another great one. He was in town speaking, and they came to visit the tomb. And to be honest with you, I say he was standing. There's kind of a larger than life crucifix behind the tomb, and he was standing up there staring at it. And I was just like, wow. This guy knows better than probably anyone else on the planet, what that's like.
Well, that's, I
But
mean, so like, just Scott, just in case someone doesn't recognize the name you just threw out there, can you
sure.
let us know who that is?
Yeah, so he played Jesus in The Passion of Christ and Mel Gibson's, great movie. And so it was very touching. I mean, he loved hearing about I think he had heard a little bit about Father Kapaun, but we got to share more, and he was like, yeah, this is my type of guy, just like Joseph, just got it done. He didn't make a big fuss about it. He just went out and did it. And
So that's so cool. So in a way, in a manner of speaking, I could say that Jesus came to his tomb.
that's right. Yeah.
That's kind of a providential sign.
Yeah. But I tell you what, I mean, we've got a lot of like kids that come through. I mean, that same day we had a tour with some teachers from one of our Catholic schools, and gosh, what a privilege to be able to share with them. And again, just the kids that come by and the individual families. We actually had a family from the Army come this summer. The husband and father was a captain. He was a helicopter rescue pilot, and he had been suffering from really advanced colon cancer that they think came from the burn pits in the early days of the war, and stage 4, and they almost, I mean, by all rights, he probably should have died. And they had come to know about Father Kapaun, not when he was in Iraq or, but afterwards, and, was drawn to him, but really obviously with that diagnosis started praying to him more. And he said, on the battlefields, I was willing to give my life for the men. This is an extension of that. I got this when I was there. Father, you were willing to give your life. If there's any way that you desire, if it's God's will, can you help me? And there's a line that's on one of our challenge coins that says, it just says, bear hardship with me. They said that saying really struck, that Father wanted to bear that hardship with us. And sure enough, they ended up at the Mayo Clinic and had a really successful surgery. But there are like 0 complications. Everything that was supposed to have, happened afterwards, like he didn't have to worry about it. And so they say like, yeah, we got medical help, but we know that there's a guiding hand through this. And gosh, just to see them praying, pouring their hearts out and Thanksgiving, they came down, was remarkable. And, that's what the crucifix is about. For the men in the camp, he died. They wanted to do something to keep his spirit alive. And they decided, hey, a crucifix would be a great way, because for them, they actually started to kid Father that at the end of his life, he started to look like Jesus. because his hair was getting a little scraggly, his beard was growing a little longer. And I used to just think like, okay, that's the cheesiest thing. But a priest said something like, no, I mean, that's what we're called to be. And if you think of like the year of mercy, when Pope Francis called it, he said, we're called to be the face of Christ's mercy to others.
Mm.
Well, that's what Father Emil was, and that's what the crucifix is about. So there's this Jewish pilot. He was a Marine pilot, got shot down. Actually, was a prisoner of war both in World War II and in Korea. And when he was placed together with the officers from Father Capen's camp, it wasn't until after Father had died, he noticed like there's something different about these guys. They're taking care of each other. It's not just dog eat dog. And he said they just had a different spirit about him. And so they started telling him why. It was about this chaplain that they had. And he was amazed and he wanted to do something. And they decided, hey, let's make this cross. And so he was an artist. They actually had to make the tools for it. He got the like the knife from the steel arch out of one of the combat boots that had worn out, put it into a wood handle. I think like use like a drain pipe or something for a chisel, and then after he got it all done to sand it, he actually went to one of the guards' huts and broke out a window and took some of the glass and used it to sand down to make it smooth and everything. But he made this beautiful cross. It's about 4 feet tall, and yeah, the men saved it, used it in the prison camp. They hung it from the ceiling when they'd have prayer services, and the communists did not really like it, but they were too afraid, I think, to take it away. And then when the men were freed, as they crossed the bridge, 4 of them carried this crucifix over with them, and they there's a picture of them with it, like still in their POW uniforms. And they said that's when they started telling the world about Father Capen and what he had done for them. So that crucifix is actually in Cape Mount Carmel High School. Was shared with the bishop, was up in Pilsen for a while, and was moved to the high school to hopefully inspire many more young people to follow his example too.
Well, Scott, that cross is beautiful. I mean, to imagine that someone carved that, in a POW camp with basically a knife, like
Right.
a 4-foot crucifix with a knife. That's
It's where I couldn't do it
itself.
with the best of tools. So yeah.
Wow, that is really, really amazing. And you said that's at Cape and High School there in Wichita, Kansas, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Now, what other high schools or places around the world are named in honor of Father Capen?
Yeah. So there was a school in Korea that was kind of started in his honor, but ironically ended up with it was run by the Salesians, just ended up with the name like Salesian High School. So they kind of rediscovered their identity not too long ago, and we're learning more. There's several places on different military installations that are named for him. There's actually an old Army garrison at Ramstein Air Base that's now part of the Air Force that is named for him. There's been several different chapels named for him, one at Fort Riley. There was a retreat house in Japan. And there's certainly a lot of different memorials for him all over the place. So yeah, so that's pretty cool. Obviously, no churches or anything yet because he's not blessed yet, but hopefully someday in the future he will be. But yeah, I think it's remarkable to see just how the Holy Spirit has brought his story kind of around the world and continues to use it. Although there's a lot of work we need to do to continue to share the story as well.
Well, Scott, you obviously believe that he is a saint in heaven. So, once he becomes canonized, what do you think he will be known for? Like, every saint's known as a patron of this or that. What do you think he might become, like the patron saint of veterans or a patron saint of what?
Yeah, I definitely think the association with the military will be very strong, both veterans and active duty. Um, prisoners of war is kind of a small subset of that, but that as well. But I do think like there's an inspiration for so many because I think it shows like you can have an authentic love for God and an authentic love for your country and want to serve both and can do so well. But I think again for all of us, there's a lot of like, we have Capen's men, and sometimes we get some questions about like, well, how come there's not a Capen's women? And it's like, well, because as men we need something to bring us
Yeah.
together. Otherwise we're too lazy to do it. But maybe not too lazy, but it just is a good impetus for us. And but really, I mean, there's so many women that are just taken by his example of the little things he did to serve in the camp. And I mean, you can make connections. I mean, in the prison camp, he would change the clothing of the men he served with who had dysentery and couldn't control their bowels, and he would take it to the river. He would break through the ice, go through this cold water, or he had other pots that he would soak them in, and then bathe their wounds. It's almost like changing diapers, right?
Yeah.
So you wake up in the middle of the night and you have to do that. I mean, you can think of him, and so I think he does have an appeal to all of us because a lot of the stuff he did, it was extraordinary circumstances, but I mean, there was simple acts of kindness that we can all follow.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Scott, I asked you that question about who the most famous person to visit the tomb was, thanks to Celia Chen. And
Right.
yeah, she's the one that said, "Hey, you got to ask Scott this question." And I just want to publicly thank Celia. Thank you, Celia, for telling me about Scott. So it's thanks to her that we're even having you here on the
Yeah,
Joe
absolutely.
show today. And so, Scott, real quickly before I ask you on this next picture, if people want to go and learn more about Father Capon, or maybe get like some of his prayer cards or things like that, what would be the best website?
Yeah, so it's just fatherkapaun.org, FRKAPAUN.org. And there's all sorts of stuff there. So we've got prayer cards that we're happy to send out. Just I think there's a little form at the bottom you can fill out and say, hey, can you send me some prayer cards? Give me a number, how many, whatnot. We're happy to do that. We've also got some fun merchandise and devotional items, as well as what you're showing there is a board book that should be coming out in another month or so. So
Hot off
there's
the press is almost. Yeah, I saw this on your Facebook.
yeah.
And, it looks so cool. I mean, for kids, I mean, our 6-year-old would love this. So can you
Oh
tell
yeah.
me more about this?
Yeah, so Leah there is actually my sister-in-law, and she was just kind of inspired one night to like, hey, there needs to be this board book, and so it kind of came to her, and her sister-in-law is did all the graphics, the illustrations, and just so cool. I mean, I know it's something that we've talked about before, but just having the simple story available to share with kids, and I think it'll be pretty exciting to have it come out. I've seen them; they look really nice, and I'm excited about them.
Well, very good. And if he becomes a canonized saint, would he be the first saint of Kansas?
Yes, definitely. So right, honestly, there's only make sure my numbers are right. I think there's only 4 canonized saints who are actually born in America. I think there's about 13 total that lived and worked in America. So there's just, I mean, there's not that many. Saint Elizabeth Ann Seton, Saint Kateri Tekakwitha, Saint Catherine Drexel, and Saint Rose Philippine Duchesne. I think I could be mixing one of those up. Are they like the ones who are born here? We've got a few blesseds: Solanus Casey, Michael McGivney now, Father Stanley Rother just down the road in Oklahoma, who are blesseds, but no canonized male saints that were born here yet, and certainly not from Kansas. Although, actually, the first one of the first martyrs in the United States actually died in Kansas. Juan Padilla, serving the natives. Although I don't know, his cause didn't like take super great hold or anything. But he might be up there too. So
It'd be so cool. Well,
yeah.
I hope it happens, and within my lifetime, it'd be awesome.
No,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on today, and I just want to thank all of our Josephology friends. And as a very special way to conclude today's Cuppa Joe, I thought it'd be kind of cool to let the servant of God, Father Emil Joseph Kapaun himself close today with a 1-minute sermon and blessing from on high, as it were, thanks to the aid of technology, as someone found this lost audio file. So you guys will be able to hear his voice in just a moment. And before we play this only excellent audio recording of him, I'd like to go ahead and again, thank you, Scott, for coming on. Thanks for all the wonderful work that you are doing. And I can't help thinking, I don't know how this works theologically, but I can't help thinking that someone such as yourself who's helping a saint to be, recognized as a canonized saint probably get some collateral graces from that. Uh,
I
maybe,
hope
maybe,
so.
Father Mio will be like, "Hey, good job, Scott. I got you a chair right here. I got you a good chair up here."
Yeah.
Leaving
Well,
you a spot.
yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So I don't know how that works out theologically, but in layman's terms, I'm sure there's something going on there. And this, as Hebrews 12 says, the great cloud of witnesses where we're all trying to
Yeah.
cheer each other on. And I know he's cheering you on, and I'm sure he's praying. And you have a daughter. I'm sure if you have a son, I wouldn't be surprised if the son's name was Emil. Then you'd have an Emil and an Amelia. That'd be like
Yeah,
pretty cool.
right.
So anyway, thank you so much for joining us today for a lovely and inspiring cup of Joe about this modern day Joseph-like saintly servant of God. And if I may, to coin maybe a new phrase, I don't know if you've heard of this one before, but I just made it up the other day. I think we should all keep calm and keeping on.
That's right.
So
That's right.
as I like to close every cup of Joe, to remind people, so don't forget to go to Joseph. All right, so if this works right, I'm going to go ahead and cue up the short video. You can find it online. And as we do that, I'll bring up another picture of Father Emil. And let's see if this works. 1 second. Here we go. This is his voice.
This is a recording of the Chaplain's Hour in Tokyo, Japan, by the Far East Network on April the 21st, 1950. We hear a hero's voice as we listen to this sermon being delivered by Father Emil Kapaun of Pilsen, Kansas.
He had his apostles gathered about him one day, and he said to them, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Do not let your heart be troubled or be afraid." The peace which God gives to people is different from the peace known by the world. The world regards peace as freedom from suffering, freedom from worry and care, freedom from want, freedom from fighting. In a way, it is a sort of a negative thing. But the peace which God gives is a gift which exists even in suffering, in want, or even in time of war. The saints who were friends of God had peace of conscience even when they were persecuted, even when they had to suffer many outrages, and some of them even had to part with their lives. We can surely expect that in our own lives there will come a time when we must make a choice between being loyal to the true faith or of giving allegiance to something else which is either opposed to or not in alliance with our faith. O God, we ask of thee to give us the courage to be ever faithful to thee. Blessed are they who suffer persecution for justice' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. May the blessing of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit descend upon all of you. Amen.
Amen. Wow, that was beautiful. It gave me like Holy Ghost goosebumps. They say, blessed are the peacemakers. And even in the field of war, he was a wonderful peacemaker. He said, the saints are the friends of God. And I could almost hear like a smile in his voice when he said sometimes they might have to give up their life, almost felt like he had a premonition there that it might happen. And I heard happiness in his voice when he said that. Is that just me, or do you pick?
No, I think you might be right. Yeah. His brother says even like the last time he talked to him before going in over to Japan, he's like, I just had this sense that maybe he knew he wasn't coming back, which is, yeah.
That's beautiful. If everyone's going to have to die, right? And there's no greater way to die than to, give up your life for God. And, as the good book says, no man hath greater love than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. And Father Emil Joseph Kapaun did this as a great example, as a great peacemaker that hopefully we can all imitate.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, Scott, thank you so much. It's nighttime over here in Hong Kong time, and I know that the sun is still coming up over there in Wichita. So have a lovely day, and let's see. Come to think of it, well, yeah, it's well, it's going to be Wednesday tomorrow. It would have been perfect if it was Wednesday today. But I always like to look at little signs. If you go back on that March 19th where he had that diary entry, it'd be kind of cool if that was a Wednesday. So send me an email if you can find that. And I'll also go ahead and link all the things down below. So for the last word, anything you'd like to say in closing?
No, just happy to help if anyone has questions or interest or whatnot. And you can check us out on Facebook too, Father Emil Kapaun, Cause for Sainthood. So yeah, we're excited about his life and just continue to share that with others,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all you're doing, Scott. Take care.
All right, thanks, John.
Catch you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.